What's up, everybody? Welcome to One on One. I have Dean Thomas with me. Let's talk about these fights because UFC 297, first pay-per-view card of the year. We have a new middleweight champion in Dricus Du Plessis. Got the split decision win over Sean Strickland. So just right off the top, I'm going to tell you, to me, regardless of who would have won, not a robbery. Like, in no way is this fight a robbery. It was so incredibly close. We can dive into some of the nitty gritty of the scorecards. I did have Dricus Du Plessis winning, as I'm a huge Sean Strickland fan. Wasn't necessarily rooting for one guy over the other, but just saying, like, I had no bias there. Would have loved to have seen him retain the belt, but I did give it just by a hair to Dricus Du Plessis. How about you?
I was actually surprised that this was a split decision. And I was surprised to hear that Dana White say that he thought Sean Strickland won the fight.
That surprised me a little bit too, yeah.
Yeah, to me, Dricus Du Plessis won the fight. I'm watching this fight thinking he's the guy that wants to win this fight. Now, he lost the first round, but after that, I thought he almost cleanly swept Sean Strickland. To me, he won the fight clean. I mean, I don't understand how people even think that Sean Strickland won the fight. I think it's because of the bias, for sure.
Did you give him round 5? Did you give DDP round 5?
No, that was the closest round to me. That was the only round that I thought could have been swung either way, but that didn't matter to me because I thought 2, 3, and 4, the Dricus dominated.
Okay. So we can go back and forth a little bit on this. I like looking at this and let's take certain things off the table. So I think most people would agree that Sean won round 1. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
And then I think the majority of people, although I think you're maybe seeing it closer than some, maybe let's go ahead and give Sean round 5, right?
I'll give him the round.
Yeah. But to your point, it could have gone either way, but I think a lot of people saw 5 for Sean. So 2, 3, and 4, you gave, sounds like, clearly to DDP. I was 4, definitely Dricus Du Plessis. So to me, it comes down to 2 and 3. And I think 3 to me was the closest. And I rewatched it and it almost comes down to just a couple of strikes.
So when you talk about cage control, so we often don't use that as part of the judging criteria. The judging criteria is damage. Now, I'm almost a little confused as to how you actually formulate what damage means, right? Yep. Because, I mean, if you punch me in the face and I cut easier and it wasn't as good as the punch that I hit you with, but you didn't cut, do you really give it to the person who cuts easier? So it's almost hard to say that damage is the deciding factor. What you see from the damage is the deciding factor. I don't really judge it from that because Dricus looked a lot worse.
Yeah.
But I thought that the striking was kind of even, right? So if the striking is kind of even, the grappling was irrelevant. So it comes down to kind of cage control. So for me, it came down to cage control and desire.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, Dricus looked in those 3 rounds like he was in control, like he had more desire, and Sean Strickland seemed to be in cruise control and not necessarily winning.
So we can go down the rabbit hole if you want to about what visible damage is and isn't. And I know you are one of the most educated about the scoring criteria on the whole broadcast team. I obviously won't shut up about the fact that I have a judging license. So I feel like you and I are good people to have this discussion. It's an interesting one because I've had this discussion with the people that I believe to be the most knowledgeable. I've had it with judges. I've had it with Sean Sheehan, which we all know he's not a judge, but he's, to me, one of the foremost thought leaders, let's call him, in terms of all things officiating, but in particular, the criteria and the application of the criteria. I've talked with John McCarthy, the guy who came up with the rules in the first place, a lot of people. And that thing that you just hit on is so critical. And it's not something I feel like doesn't get talked about enough to really be clear in the minds of the fans. And that is, how much does it matter if someone gets cut? And the answer is, and this is a weird answer, medium. It means medium. And imagine an elbow gets thrown and lands on a guy, and it's solid connection, but he does not wobble and he does not get cut, right? So that's one example. that exact same elbow thrown in the exact same way with the exact same velocity causes a cut. That does count for a little bit more because it had immediate visible damage. However, the exact same elbow thrown at the exact same velocity to the exact same part of the body, and for some reason it wobbles the opponent. It causes them to stumble back or even fall down or have, cover up or whatever, have a visible reaction. That is much more impactful than the cut. So at the end of the day, people need to understand that what we are looking for in terms of damage is not necessarily blood, contusions, swelling, etc. Yes, those things matter. And there's a whole bunch of nuance in the way that they matter. They matter in the immediate, they matter in the round that they happen. They only pertain to the strike that inflicted them. When we use the word damage, the audience goes, well, geez, he's covered in blood. That's a lot of damage. Well, it is and it isn't. And the majority of what you're looking for in terms of effective striking, damage, the things that we constantly bring up, you're looking for concussive damage that affects the equilibrium, or I guess equilibrium is the best way to put it, gets the fight closest to being finished in that way. But this was a tricky fight, right? Because we did have visible damage and it did, you could say, affect the fight, but none of the strikes that landed that damage were like, oh man, that one strike stole the round. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of my point, is that, it's the language is so important. Like you said, the language is so important because when you think about the word damage, you automatically assume superficial damage to the face and what it looks like.
Yeah.
But damage not necessarily how close it was to actually finishing somebody.
Yeah.
Because, and even that, it can be tricky too, because 1 inch to the left can hit a chin and put somebody completely out.
Yeah.
So it's very tricky.
A body shot, like a really good body shot can land. But if the guy has a good poker face, it's not going to score all that well as if he didn't have a poker face. Because the only way that a judge can determine how, I mean, obviously there's auditory impact, like you can kind of tell, but to a degree, it is up to the guy who received the body shot to let the judge know how damaging it was or wasn't. If you fold, if you continue to protect it, then obviously that that was an effective strike. But there's a lot of body shots that if you can poker face your way through it, are not really going to score the way that they might have otherwise.
See, Laura, and this is an issue. This is one of the biggest issues with MMA in general, combat sports in general. And we're always going to have these problems because combat sports was designed and is regulated for idiots. It is real talk. It's regulated and it's designed for idiots because it's designed for two guys who don't really know how to fight, or maybe one guy knows how to fight, the other guy doesn't know how to fight, and he can just dominate them. And we can always tell the winner from the eye test.
Yeah.
And now the fighting has become a little bit more sophisticated and elaborate. And the judging and scoring criteria and everything stayed the same for idiots when it first started. We're going to always have these problems because it's going to come down to moments, and it's going to, just like a football game comes down to sometimes a field goal. It's going to come down to moments.
And I think that, and we've had this talk before here on this channel, or maybe I had it by myself. I can't remember, but I like, especially in sports, I like things to be black and white, winner, loser, points, no points. Like this quarter ended at this time and then it began, you like it to be very definitive and objective. And anytime you have judging, just like you do in figure skating or gymnastics or whatever, it is inherently subjective to a degree. And the goal would be to take out as much subjectivity as possible. But the reality is that in MMA right now, there's so much subjectivity, even when it is the best judges. And I do think all these judges did a tremendous job and no one screwed up. We're not here to talk about bad judging at all. There's just inherently so much subjectivity that you're going to have people that feel dissatisfied with it because their guy didn't win, right?
Well, it's not necessarily even, and I rarely ever think judges do a bad job.
Yeah, I agree.
Rarely. I'm always like, you know what? That's what it is. This is the system and that is what it is. because of the system that we've allowed to stay governing the way we judge fights. So to me, it's all perspective. Where they're sitting, what's going from the angle that they see a fight,
Which
all
is
that
massive.
plays a, oh yeah, it's very important. So what the way they see it, that's how, okay, we got to accept it. I accept it. So, but to me, other things need to change in terms of the scoring. I mean, just the 10-point must system for MMA is just incredibly ridiculous when you think about how sophisticated this game really is, how much is going on. And you talk about body shots and punches and cuts and takedown attempts, or he didn't get him down, he didn't hold him down, he didn't do no damage. But I mean, all that stuff has to carry some type of weight. Like the guy with the initiative doing that has to carry some type of weight. And I don't think that they've given Dricus enough credit. Well, I mean, obviously he won the fight, so he got enough that he needed to win the fight. But in terms of the way we are viewing this in the public perspective of it, is like, oh, Sean should have won. But I'm thinking it's probably more so because in these last couple of months, Sean Strickland has become the darling of the UFC.
And there's still this champion. Yes, and there's still this completely wrong, but for whatever reason, pervasive idea that you have to like take the belt from the champion, meaning you got to really win, and not just win, but you got to really, really win, which is not, it's not a thing. It's not.
Yeah, that's not a thing. Like, I don't understand like why we have to come up with these stupid gentleman agreements that we all have to accept. Oh, like, oh, you have to take it from the champ. To be the champ, you got to, like, that's not a thing.
I want to know who said that first, because it's just an idea that's existed as long as I can remember, and that people just sort of like repeat when they're at a bar watching the fights, like, oh no, you got to really take it from the champ. That's not true. It's just every fight is judged individually on that night, and in the terms of this rule set, which is different than the rule set that like ONE FC uses. Each round is its own little mini fight. We're not judging the fight in its entirety. And that's, I don't know what your thoughts are, because I know you don't love the 10-point must, and I'm with you there in particular because there's such a wide variance in 10-9 rounds. Like, it's ridiculous that you can have a 10-9 round that is almost a 10-8, and you can have a 10-9 round that is like the smallest of differences, which I think we saw some of in this fight between DDP and Sean Strickland. That to me spells like those two things should not be the same score.
No, they should not be.
And yet they are 90% of the time. What did you make of Sean's performance overall? Like what were your big takeaways from what Sean did?
I gotta say this about Sean is, and I actually text Eric Nixick after the fight. I said, man, I love that he's so brave and courageous to say what he wants to say. I wish it was a little more inclusive and peaceful and positive, but I'm impressed, and I love the fact that he's so brave. And he fought better than I thought he was going to fight. While he didn't self-sabotage his fight, he also did not fight like a champion. He fought like he was in sparring and comfortable doing that. So, and that's the difference. And there's a real big difference in that too. And there's a difference in not trying to throw it away, but also not necessarily trying to win. And he didn't, and like the last round, it did look like he was trying to win. But in the rounds that I'm referring to, 2 through 4, he didn't necessarily look like he was a champion trying to win. He looked like a fighter who liked to fight.
I had a conversation privately with Sean one time, and I asked him, I was like, bro, why don't you ever offensively wrestle? Because everyone I've ever talked to that shares a room with you says how good your wrestling game is and how good your grappling game is. And he just kind of was like, oh, he didn't really want to give me a straight answer, but it was kind of like, you just get these big guys. And it's like, is the juice worth the squeeze? And he was kind of talking around it, but it made me think that the only thing that Sean Strickland is, I was going to say afraid of, I don't think Sean's afraid of anything, but I think the only thing that Sean Strickland is concerned about in a fight is getting tired. Because he has a style that has to have a certain level of gas. And if that goes away, it's like, what do I have? I don't have a Hail Mary one punch knockout type of power. Again, now this is just me postulating and theorizing here, but I wonder if there's just enough of a concern where he's like, I don't want to get posterized because if I get tired, that's a possibility. Do you think that's a symptom of training?
It's a
Because I
symptom of
wonder if
mind. It's a
guys,
symptom of mindset and
do you think he gets
part of.
put on the back foot long enough in training? I guess is my question. Like, who's out there putting it to Sean for 5 straight rounds in the training room?
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily that he even needs that. It's all a part. It's just a mindset issue, and it's a mindset issue that, and it's an ideology that we've all accepted that I don't agree with, but it's very well accepted that, oh, if you're going to offensively wrestle and you don't get it, you're going to get tired. And if you do this, you're going to get tired. And if you do that, you're going to get tired. It's a mindset, and you have to change your mindset. And Sean Strickland is not past the point of where he can't fix this. Because I'm going to tell you right now, and I actually email or text Eric Nixick on this too. I text him, I said, man, his punching mechanics look so much better now.
Yes.
Because prior to a few fights ago, every time he threw a punch, his elbows flared. He never had no power, and he would always, he'd always pot shot guys with no power. But now, and Eric said, yeah, man, we figured his straight lines were better. And now when you look at the way he punches, his punches have power behind them, and his body's behind it. So he just changed his mindset on this. Like, he accepted the fact, like somebody told him something, and he accepted the fact that the way he punched was weaker than if he did it technically better. So he changed his mindset. So I'm thinking if he could change his mindset to realize that if he would offensively wrestle sometimes, and he won't get tired doing it, because he would just incorporate that into his skill set and incorporate that into the same pace he does everything else, he could actually use it to his advantage. But it has to change in his mind first.
Yeah, and even introducing that into your striking game, because I think that was maybe another issue that held him back a little bit in this fight, was just how how myopic he was about punching the head. He wasn't really using the teeps the way he did against Adesanya, not nearly as much anyway. He wasn't really looking to target the body, whether it was with kicks or punches. He was trying to jab, straight, and hook Dricus's head, and that was about it. And that is not really a mixed martial arts fight at that point. And you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, I guess. And he has the tools. He has the kicking game when he wants to. We saw it much more against Izzy. He has the grappling game. I mean, his defensive grappling looked tremendous in this fight. I thought his ability to not necessarily stop the initial takedown, but to get back up was very impressive to me. I thought his checks looked awesome. But
oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, so effortless, right?
Yeah.
But again, that's a condition of a guy who likes to fight.
Yeah.
A guy who likes to fight more than he likes to win. No one has been had that label stronger than George Masvidal. I mean, no one has lost more close decisions to guys he should have beaten than George Masvidal, because he likes to fight so much.
That is a great example. I never thought about that before, but there are a lot of similarities there. That is a really interesting take.
Like, here's a guy who's better than this competition, but he's so happy to be just in
a fight,
in the mix of this fight, that he's not doing what he needs to do in order to win. He's not making adjustments that he needs to make in order to win.
Is it a fear of taking risks? Because both Jorge and Sean, I would say, were really, I mean, no one knocked Jorge out until Kamaru did. He spent a very long career not really getting touched all that clean, a lot like Sean, right? Like, is there a fear of looking like a fool because, okay, the one time you take a risk, you get knocked out, and that's
no,
like
I don't even think it's that. I think they just like playing with their food. It's not a fear of getting knocked out. I think that they like being better than their opponent, and they know that they're better, and they're out there doing things, and they're not necessarily seeing it from our perspective on the outside, thinking that, man, you could easily win this fight, and you're letting this guy stick around, and then maybe their opponent does something to steal the round, but they don't recognize that. Because what they only thing they recognize is that I'm so much better than this guy. I can do what I want. I'm jabbing this guy to death. This guy's not, and they're looking at it from a very self-centered approach, and they're thinking, he's trying to take me down. He can't even take me down. And that's why, like, when the fight's over, they'll in their head be like, I won this fight.
And there is an inherent bias in the criteria for guys who hit harder, like just simply put, because there's always this dial, right? Like, so Dricus lands, let's say a right hand, not a huge one, but a right hand that lands. And Sean, is fit, like you can physically see him go back a little bit from it. He's not rocked or anything like that. He doesn't have some big reaction, but he's moved back. And then Sean maybe lands 3 really clean jabs, but Dricus is not sort of physically moved backward from it. We're taught that the right hand from Dricus is still superior to those smaller jabs. Now, again, it becomes this massively gray area, like, okay, well, then how many jabs make up for the right hand? And then how do but the fact is that there is an inherent bias in the scoring criteria for guys who hit harder. So guys like Dricus Du Plessis, who are physical, big guys, they don't have to connect as many times. And we've talked about this before too. There's always this misconception because we keep putting out the significant strike stat, and everything at distance is counted as a significant strike, but they are not all created equal. So I don't know.
Yeah, so and that's interesting too, because in terms of the way Strickland defends punches, he defends punches with his arms and his feet. So like he moves back, leans back, and throws his arms up. Yeah. So Dricus will wing a big punch, and the visual of that wing of a big punch, and if he hits something, that has to account for something in the eyes of the judges. Not saying that it should, not necessarily that it should, and I know it doesn't count for Sean because Sean's thinking he didn't hit me.
Yeah.
But in terms of the judges, when they hear that sound, and depending on which side of the cage you're on, it might have looked like it hit something or got close. So he might be getting points for that.
Well, and then when Dricus goes into defense mode, he's just throwing up a super tight high shell, but he's not necessarily moving backward.
No, he's just,
of course, he does
shelling
times,
up
but like
and absorbing it.
He shells up, sits down, and then throws something big in return. And it looks like maybe the jab that did get through didn't really do much because he wasn't physically moved out of position. So it's just, I don't know, those little things can make a big difference.
And I'm sure they did. And I'm sure that's why in a close fight like this, Dricus got the nod because of those little things. And I don't necessarily disagree with it.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily disagree with it.
Yeah, I don't either. I was very, very impressed. And I will go, we didn't do a preview, but in that preview, I will admit that I would have said the longer fight would favor Sean. I was one of those people that wasn't like entirely convinced of Dricus's cardio yet. I mean, for good reason. There's tape out there of it not looking great. And there's a lot of evidence that he simply doesn't have experience in later rounds. Like he just doesn't. So that was part of my thinking in terms of how this fight was going to play out. I could not have been more wrong. I was very, very impressed with his cardio.
To me, I didn't think cardio was going to be an issue for him. And I saw it in his eye, man. And there's just something about a champion because it doesn't last long. Like, and a champion when a champion becomes a champion, there's something about them, and there's something about their presence. There's something about the glow around them. And I felt that with Dricus. I felt that with him. The way he dressed, the way he talked, the way he carried himself. I felt that about him. And I said, he's not going to get tired. He's going to be very well prepared. This moment's not too big for him. He's got a country around him. And I just had the feeling that he was going to be able to pull this off for those reasons, because things just align for winners. Winners, they have something that aligns for them, and you can sense it. And not that Sean Strickland's a loser, but he just seemed like a guy who wants to put his belt under a pile of laundry.
Yeah.
And Dricus was like, you know what? I want to take this belt back to South Africa. And I could feel that. And there's no way he was going to allow himself to get tired in this fight.
Well, he did a tremendous job of like you say, fighting like a champion, and I think he impressed a lot of people despite his mechanics still looking
Still look terrible.
still
Still,
looking.
still look like RoboCop. His body type, as much as it looks like a fighter's body type, it's not really a fighter's body type because he's like, it just causes him to be stiff, like in his shoulders and everything is just so like whatever
He's
it
very
is, like
he's very
yeah.
barrel chested and has a very short torso.
And his arms don't really, I don't know, it's just something about that that just doesn't really, it's not really all that conducive for fighting. So it just, I think it's a little harder for him to fight and to like pick up fighting techniques.
Well, it works.
But it works. It works. He gutted through it and he made it work for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And a tremendous win, and congratulations to him. And I'm anxious to see if we get Dricus versus Izzy. Maybe we get Dricus versus Hamzat. We will see how that ends up playing out. I could see Dricus versus Izzy on 300. Just saying. Dean, I feel like I've taken up a whole lot of your time.
Nah, we good. You know what I'm saying? I got nothing but love for you.
I feel the same way. I can't thank you enough for joining me on this recap of UFC 297, guys. Hopefully you got some stuff out of this, whether it was the criteria, whether it was Dean's. I love hearing his thoughts on Sean Strickland's mentality, everything above. We appreciate your time very, very much. If you will, please click the like, click the subscribe. It helps me out, helps Dean out, helps the channel out. And that is the goal for this year, to really grow this channel. You know, I got DC and Michael Bisping are constantly dropping my YouTube channel. I need to start dropping my YouTube channel more, don't I?
Yeah, you need to drop you. That's all DC does. Drop his YouTube channel.
So that's my goal for this year. I'm just going to get more flagrant with it, right? Okay, guys, please, dear God, please subscribe. Anyway, we appreciate you, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, and we'll see you there.